Hey guys, Lightane here, and welcome to the World Line, where anything can happen, even a spin-off to the Steins Gate series. Yes, you heard right. So today, let's have a look at Steins Gate linear-bound Phenogram and see if it's worth it. Steins Gate linear-bound Phenogram is a side story in the Steins Gate universe. This isn't considered canon at all, and instead are just some fun side stories. That being said, I do think that some of these ideas were present in the original game and have been fleshed out here, so they may help answer some loose questions from the original Steins Gate. Linear-bound Phenogram was released in 2013 in Japan for one console generation, then remastered and bundled with the PS4 version of Steins Gate Elite in 2018. In 2019, it finally got translated to English, and it still comes bundled with Steins Gate Elite for the PS4. But LBP, not to be confused with Little Big Planet, doesn't follow the same structure as the other Steins Gate novels. Instead of one long cohesive story, we have 11 shorter ones. Each story is about 2 to 3 hours and stars a different character as the main, and it is set in world lines that we have never seen before, so anything can happen. This game is a true visual novel once again, and it is the same art style as the original game. As I went from Elite to this, I was pleasantly surprised with how different all the characters looked and how much personality each have. I really like Huke's art style here. Now, as this is a sequel of sorts to the original game, there might be some slight spoilers, but I'll try my best to keep them to a minimum. Being an anthology, it's hard to talk about the whole game without diving into the individual stories themselves. Right off the bat, I want to say that some of these stories are better than others, but you have to view all of them if you want to get the very last story. But if it's a character you don't want to watch or don't want to read, you can just skip through the whole thing, you don't have to read it. Dr. Jekyll Online is an Ocarina story. Now, the fun part of each story is seeing what kind of world line we are in, as that will determine how the characters act. There is a database out there with all of this documented, but it's really hard to follow when I don't get it, so I don't know, I'll just go by what the game shows me. Anyway, in this story, Ocarina has become a superhero. Yup! It started off ridiculous. He learns of crimes, mostly to do with his friends, and then travels back in time in order to stop them. In this world line, it seems that Mayuri gets into trouble quite often, so Ocarina has to save her all the time. This was one of the better stories, and I really liked it. It was a great way to start off the goofy nature of the game and show you that anything can happen. But it does have some twists, and while they aren't hard to see coming, the emotion in the story is still there because you should already care about these characters, making the ending target your heartstrings. The Caged Bird Sings is a Daru story. If you saw my other Steins Gate reviews, then you will know that I am not a fan of Daru's character, and now we are inside his head. It is just as scary as it sounds. So this story has Daru bump into a character called Yuki. You may recognize that name because that's his future wife. What? Now, I don't think they settled on what she looked like until Zero, because you never see her aside from this one gallery picture, and even then it's kinda covered. This took me out of the story a little bit, as Daru and Yuki talk quite a bit, and then you just have to stare at the wall art while they're doing so. So Yuki gets involved with a bad guy plot by accident, and so Daru goes to figure out what happened to her and save the day. It's kind of meh. It's made worse by the fact that very little happens and you don't even get to see the characters talking. It has a very small cliffhanger ending as well, which is pretty lame. For a short story, it's probably the worst one in my opinion. Vermilion Soteria is a Kirisu story. This story could easily have been part of the original game and add more depth to Kirisu and her character, but as that game is strictly told through Ocarina's eyes, it makes sense that it wasn't there. Basically, it has Kirisu dealing with the potential death of a character and how time traveling to save them doesn't appear to work. It shows how hard her choices are and gives depth to her thoughts through all of this. It also expands upon her relationship with her father, which was good. I also like how Faris comes up to her and straight up says, "Change your behavior to Okabe or I'll snatch him up first." It's a great line. Overall, this is one of the best stories in the game. It even has some narrative about the Council of 300, which is like a whole different story that I'm not getting into now. Just note that it is interesting to see it here. Ghostly Rendezvous is a Suzuha story. In this story, Suzuha goes through a very strange experience. She wakes up one morning able to see two other versions of herself from different world lines. She sees Beta Suzuha from Steins Gate 0 and another one whom they call Omega, who was raised without war. This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit with the story structure or even the rules set up in the games. I get that it is a what if scenario, but every other story sticks to the rules. They aren't hallucinations either because they know things that Alpha doesn't, and even move things in the world so they're like ghosts or something? After all of that, the story is kinda meh. It's trying to give Alpha Suzuha a truly happy ending because the real ending she got in the original could have been happier. So not a great story, but at least Suzuha gets some new outfits, which are nice. Built with Love is a Tennoji story. This is the first story from a character that isn't a lab member. In this world line, Okabe sent the lotto numbers back in time and it caused a change which let Tennoji win the first prize. 3 million yen, baby, damn. So his first instinct is to treat his daughter Nai to anything that she wants. He's a good dad, even if he's a little bit scary to everyone else. Now the one thing he wants to give her is a home and a place to belong. It's kind of touching, it's heartfelt because, you know, being a single parent is hard. But when he tries to make her happy, she feels like something is missing every time. It's really touching and also one of the most funny at times. Like when they build a robot mum, it's pretty stupid. The ending was really sweet, and while you realize what Nai is truly missing is her mother, it isn't hard to figure that out, it wraps up nicely. A very good story indeed. Superhero Chat-Noir is a Faris story. This is one of the more light-hearted stories in the anthology. With her father being around, she isn't being treated with lots of respect, and she is just a young girl, and thus has to fight for everything she wants. This obviously frustrates her, and eventually she becomes a superhero. Yep, a completely logical train of thought. She teams up with Suzuha and they go around helping people, but with a mask comes some anonymity and some of her pent-up feelings start to ooze out in an unhealthy way. It's a fun story and certainly done with a lot of fan service, as those gallery pictures. Damn, I see where Daru's coming from. Damn it, now I'm a pervert. It's a good story, let's just leave it at that. Hermaphroditus In The Labyrinth is a Lucas story. Do you want to stare at an androgynous character nude whilst they cover their chest and spout exposition at you for 20 minutes? You do? Then this is the story for you. In all seriousness, the start of the story is really odd. It's mostly going through the internal struggle that Luca goes through just before the end of her route in the original novel. But due to it being very closely tied to that story, we kind of know what Luca went through already. Unlike Kurisu's story, it doesn't seem to add very much to the overall story as it should. Instead, it expands upon the alternate ending, which I like as it does have a lot of emotion, but it's not done particularly well. Part of the reason is the original hit me so hard because of Okurin's loss, Luca's loss, and while it's still crazy and deep, just not as powerful. It's one of the more boring stories in the game. Once again, Luca gets shafted. Eternal Polaris is a Mayuri story. The premise behind this story is that Mayuri can see the pain that Okurin is in due to his time leaping and D-mouse ending shenanigans of the first game. But unlike that first game, she decides to be more proactive about trying to make Okurin happy and help ease his suffering. It's the logical place to go with her and her story, but I kind of wish they didn't do that. I wish they went silly and over the top like with Faris or Tennoji or Okurin's story. Instead, we get a pretty slow story, and that's not to say it's bad, because it is in fact made very well and it has many feelings, it made me feel things. It's just tied heavily into the original and it pulls at those same heartstrings. So while I appreciate the story and how it was told, I kind of wish they had more fun with this. They could have. It's hard to explain my thoughts on this. It's still a good story though. The Quantum Awakening is a Moeka story. This is the story I expected the first game was going to tell. Moeka is still doing some shady work for FB and infiltrates the Future Gadgets lab. The change is that Mayuri and Kurisu become active friends of hers. That's something that really bothered me in the original. Moeka is a character that has so little self-worth that when FB gives her some, she becomes hers for life. But then Okurin and the other lab members come along and they also give it to her, but she kind of throws it all away for FB and never even questions it. I get in some world lines she isn't completely connected connected to them, but still, I expected something. This story is very by the books and offers some way more fan service for Moeka than I ever thought I needed. It's also the most she has probably talked in any of the games and series of anything so far. The ending, though, was a little bit silly. For a trained woman, she is pretty stupid and laughable when it's meant to be dramatic. I did enjoy seeing a new side to her, so I don't think it is a bad story. Abduction Across 3 Worlds is an Ocarina story. Yep, Ocarina gets 2 stories in this game. Now, fun fact, this story was written by Uchikoshi. That name might sound familiar to you. He is the writer of the Zero Escape series. You know, 999, Virtue's Last Reward, and Zero Time Dilemma. And oh boy, you could feel his twisty little brain working with this story and time travel. It starts with Ocarina arriving in a world line, but having lost a good chunk of his memories. He time leapt, but in this world line it doesn't seem to work properly. That's a nice way to set up this kidnapping story. Oh no, Mayuri has been abducted! Now it's up to Ocarina to try and save her once again. He has a single clue on his phone with a D-mail talking about her abduction, and man, it's a wild ride from there. As the name implies, Ocarina changes the past and jumps world lines across 3 distinct ones, but then keeps jumping between them as new information is found and new D-mails are sent, and it's honestly a little confusing, but oh so good. And of course there is the classic end twist that Uchikoshi is famous for, and it doesn't disappoint. This was another one of my favorite stories from the game, and being so bite-sized really helped the pace. Lunar Bifrost is a Nai story. And here is our final story in the game, and it is told from our favorite little girl, Nai. Set in a world line where our heroes were captured by CERN and her father dies, it is a bleak world line to say the least. A year after all of these events, Nai is living with Faris and is having some issues dealing with the events from the first game. As she was only 11, well 10 in the first game, she doesn't understand what happened and why her father died. That is until she bumps into Daru, who just recently escaped CERN and is looking for a way to change world lines. From here, she learns more about what happened to her past and becomes an active member of the team. She gets a lot of growth and depth here, and even Daru gets some as well. It boggles the mind! It starts to show his good side, the man that he is destined to come, so that's nice. The whole story is about hope and learning to deal with loss, and it does very well with a good but still dour ending. A great way to finish off this game. And there we have it, all 11 stories here. Now some additional things to talk about. Each of these stories was written by a different guest writer and overseen by 5PB. I think that was a good idea as it helps keep the series fresh and offers some different views on potential events. Like I said, there are a few of these that have elements which are now definitely part of my headcanon for the main story because they just fit so well. Also, this was my first time properly using the phone and playing around with it, and I mean, it's fine. You have some control, and unlike Elite, it doesn't pause the game to show you the text. It still adds only a little bit to the gameplay, honestly, but the emails have chains for some extra side story, and that's about it. While you can get each story to 100% with the emails, there is literally no point in doing so. There's not even any trophies on the PS4. I did so anyway because I'm crazy, but I still wish they had added like a single CG to the game for completing all of this. In my opinion, Steins Gate linear bound Phenogram is worth it, but this one has a heavy contingency that you played and liked the original Steins Gate, because if you didn't, then you will definitely not like this game. It was made for fans of the series, and it shows with the fun stories, the fan service, and the heart that was put into it. While most of the stories are good, there are a few great ones, like Lunar Bifrost, Abduction Across 3 Worlds, and Vermilion Soteria. While some bad ones do exist, like The Caged Bird Sings and Hermaphroditus In The Labyrinth, you can skip through them, making it no real big deal. So check it out if you want more Steins Gate.